The GizFab channel is proudly supported by this awesome collection of people and companies. Spicy Micra merch now available. Head to GizFab.com, go and make a purchase. All proceeds help us go racing. Go do a buy. Do it now. So, like a horrendous episode of Deja Vu, I broke another engine. Now, I know what you're thinking, why the hell am I still persevering with this QG engine? Well, the facts are, the engines themselves still haven't broken. Confused? Let me explain. So, we had an engine at Brandtouch last year, fine. Alton Park, fine. Donington is where we broke the first engine, and that is when the crank sensor pickup wheel fell off the crankshaft, and it fell off the crankshaft due to the horrendous vibrations we were getting through the chassis through this drive shaft being too long. But anyway, that engine was scrap. I then put another engine in for round 7 at Brandtouch again, and if you remember when we had the Elon Musk moon tune and we melted cylinder 2, because an injector wire came off the injector and that cylinder ran lean, melted the piston. We then put another engine in for round 8 at Snetterton Park. Now that engine failed through a silly mistake I had done. Is that when putting the new timing chain kit on the engine, I had someone come to the workshop. I got distracted at the critical stage of when I was tightening up the crank pulleys, and unfortunately they were not tight. Now the engine did do all 4 sessions, and literally I'm parked in the pit lane waiting for everyone to reverse into the pit garages, and literally that is when the engine let go. So I did complete all 4 sessions, but ultimately the pulley fell off the camshaft because I had not tightened it up correctly. And then this engine has also died from a fuel related problem. Now, because you've got the Haltech on there, we can data log what's happening with the engine, and one of the important things we can data log is injector duty, EGTs and fuel pressure. And what I can tell you is the fuel pressure regulator seems to have failed, which is what has killed this engine here. So up until now, I have not jacked up the valve train, I have not bent a rod, I have not snapped a crank, nothing. So all of these engines have died through a third party problem. So that is why I'm going to persevere with the setup. It has worked really well. It just can't seem to string a good enough session together, or there's always an issue that causes the engine to fail. So yeah. So anyway, as per this has got to come out, I've got a new engine and gearbox on its way. Now, I have opted to purchase a 1.8 to put in it. Because we have swapped class to Classic and Retro, we no longer have a CC limit on the engine that we can use. We're going to give the 1.8 a try, which could confuse a couple of people, because in a previous video I announced that JE Pistons had come on board as a sponsor, and now JE have made us these custom set of forged pistons to suit the 1.5 engine. So I still want to keep the 1.5 just because we're a bit stubborn at the minute, and I've got a selection of half decent engines over there to rebuild, and also because JE have made us these nice pistons, it'd be a waste not to use them. So we're going to build a 1.5 at some point this year. So for the time being, I've got a 1.8 on its way to put in. I have also got another gearbox, a fresh gearbox to go in, which we are going to completely overhaul. New bearings and all the shafts, new seals, everything. Again, last year, bit of a rush job, we only swapped over the diff bearings, whereas this time we're going to inspect everything to make sure the gearbox is fine. So before I start to take the engine out, let's put this up in the air and let's inspect the damage from underneath. There's quite a bit of damage behind the bumper. Yeah, so all this is creased up here. As you see, this is meant to be flat down here. And on the other side, similar story, not quite as bad. And this is when I unfortunately had to abort my attempt at going around Coppice Flat, and I straightened up, went across the grass, not realising there's quite a few bad bumps in the grass. Yeah, and ultimately that has destroyed our splitter, and you can sort of tell by the state of the brackets what sort of impact it was. I'm not going to fuss too much about repairing that for the purpose of the engine swap. If we get time, we'll have a look at repairing it. Now, I'd already discussed plans with Ilya to make a spanky new carbon splitter for this, so all's not lost. And just with deadlines, I'm prioritising getting the car running again rather than getting the aero back on. Plus, Ilya's mad busy with the Clio as well, so a bit of unfortunate damage, and I'm just going to have to be a bit clever with how we repair it.
The next morning,
we've got the 1.8 all bolted up into the car. We have got the gearbox, which Ash has rebuilt. We've got all the gears, spotted dog. Now, on the subject of gearboxes, this is the root cause, or one of the causes to our gear selection issues at Cadwell. Now, this is a copper bushing, and this is something to do, I believe, with this piece down here, which has got your selector thing from your selector fork from your gear stick just here, and that had come loose and basically was not allowing us to select gears. On top of that as well, let's see if I can find it, and as well as that, we'd also been chewing at some teeth. I can't remember which gear it is. Oh, it's this gear here. I'm not sure how well you can see because the GoPro gets quite blurry up where the synchro sort of go over. It's all quite mashed from not being able to engage and disengage the clutch properly, which then brings me on to another subject, which is we are going to be running, well, we're going to be converting the system back to a hydraulic clutch. So this is the factory slave cylinder. I've got the factory master cylinder over here, and then we're going to modify the clutch pedal so that sits inboard, because we haven't really got room to outboard it on the firewall as per factory. So yeah, it's once again another Saturday, and I'm going to spend a few hours getting everything bolted back onto the car. Obviously I've got to clean everything because everything's still covered in all the oil from the PCV hole that was on the back of the engine when the piston melted. And there's a couple of things that I want to sort as well. Is we were getting odd EGT readings once again, and now I've got the manifold off, I'm going to set the height of all the sensors before I put it back in the car. Now, Ash was saying that there was a weird reading on cylinder 1, and if you look on cylinder 4, you can see the probe just there, just sticking out. And then on cylinder 1, let me get a torch. Now on cylinder 1, as you see, the probe's not even sticking out. So yeah, before we put the manifold on, I'm going to reset the height of all of those. So yeah, let's get all that done and get all this bolted back to the engine. So it turns out I did an extremely terrible job at ending this video. So here I am 6 weeks later in post editing, filming an outro for you. Currently I'm already into the debrief and redo after Brands, and you're watching the debrief and redo after Cadwell. So that gives you an idea about just how far I am behind on these videos. But don't worry, we're changing the schedule. There's going to be many videos coming. So let's just talk about what's just happened on the screen. We've fitted some brand new brake discs from High Spec, pre-top job from High Spec. I sent them the old discs pretty much straight away after Cadwell, the first week Cadwell, and they gave me a lead time of 6 weeks, which would have been post Brands hatch. I said, look, so I'm going to send you the discs, take the measurements and stuff you need, but can you please send me the old discs back ASAP, so I can at least use them as a means to get by. And then the next week they sent the old discs back with the new discs, so they shrunk their 6 week lead time down to 1 week, so massively appreciate that. So what else were we doing in that video? Oh yeah, so other things to note in that B-roll segment you've just seen is we relocated the wideband O2 sensor boss into on the upper part of the downpipe. It used to sit down here on the bottom, because we kept killing wideband sensors, at least one sensor every 2 rounds, and it was just getting massively expensive to replace those sensors at, you know, 80-90 quid a pop. So we've moved the wideband sensor to see if that changes the lifespan of the sensor. So that is why we did that. So another major modification in that video, which should have really been its own separate video to help with all you K11 owners out there, is the hydraulic clutch conversion. Now, I ordered all the bits way in advance to get the conversion done. My plan was to use the Primera P12 OEM master cylinder and then modify the K11 clutch pedal so the master cylinder was inboard, so it would have been above my foot inside the cabin rather than this side of the firewall. But when the master cylinder arrived, the bolt pattern looked near enough identical to the bolt pattern in the firewall. So after a quick test fit, that was confirmed. So the way that the pedals mount on these chassis is that you have 2 studs on the back of the pedal which poke through the firewall, and then the master cylinder then bolts to these 2 studs. So that meant, well, if the Primera P12 master cylinder fits the firewall, then in theory the Primera P12 clutch pedal should also fit. And it did for the most part. We just had to cut a bit of the top bracket to clear the firewall, but the 2 main parts which go through the firewall, which forms the sandwich for the clutch master cylinder, was a direct fit. So happy days. And then all I had to do is, if you take off the plastic top where the fluid goes in, it's actually notched, so you can rotate that at different angles and it locks into position. So that's why you see me hammering out the split pin, just so we can move that off at like 75 degrees ish, so it clears the inlet manifold. And I'm happy to report that the clutch is absolutely spot on. Love it. It feels really, really, really good. And then after all of that, get a phone call from Ash. It's got a spot on a dyno. He could spend a good afternoon on it, so it's got to be done now. So Ash comes and picks up the car and spends about 4 or 5 hours on the dyno with it. And I don't know what he's done, but it's just a complete different car. It drove absolutely mega, and it really was fun to drive at Brands Hatch, as you'll see in the vlog when it comes out next week, hopefully. The drivability of the car was absolutely insane. Spent a bit more time on the transient throttle and the boost maps, and it honestly, it's never driven so well. Almost zero lag. The transient throttle alone was made the car absolutely amazing to drive. Anyway, I know you're only interested in what power it made. Luckily, I've got a graph which shows exactly that. So a bit of context is the pink line was the setup we were using at Cadwell Park, and the blue setup is the power that we were going to be running for Brands Hatch. So yeah, as you can see, we've gone from 261 to 272 power of the horse. But the most impressive thing is the torque value, which I believe is a bit this one here. So we've gained about, what's that work out at, 35, 40 foot-pounds of torque at the same point in the rev range, and that's made all the difference to how this car drives. So I've actually missed a real crucial piece of information here, nor have I shown video footage of it either. But I've actually fitted a brand spanking new GFB fuel pressure regulator. After the whole Cadwell fuel pressure debacle, I had assumed that the Side-Tech fuel pressure regulator was faulty, so I fit a new one. However, Ash took the car to Dyno and straight away was getting some fuel starvation problems, some fuel pressure issues, sort of like in the mid-range to high RPM. So we shot down, got the tools out, and on the screen here is what we found, is that the inline fuel filter had crushed and imploded in on itself, and was causing a flow restriction in the fuel at high RPM. So this here is what killed the engine at Cadwell. But we're going to call that video here because I really want to get this video out before I get the Brands Hatch vlog uploaded for your viewing pleasure. So with that being said, don't forget to like, share, comment, all that stuff. Helps with the YouTube algorithms and engagement as well, which would hopefully push this video further forward. Thanks for watching. See you in the Brands Hatch vlog.